Hi, this is Sir Jet, and welcome to the first formal lecture here in our online history class. Today we will talk about the reasons why we need to study Philippine history. Let me ask you, what was your favorite subject when you were in high school? Was it history or was it something else? What made you like or what made you hate history? You know, here in college, we will study history, and I bet this will be your favorite subject this term. Why? We will have the reasons in a while. But first, let me tell you the counter argument. What other people say about history, why it's not a good subject, or why they hate history. You know, some people say that we are living in the 21st century and history is no longer relevant. Well, if this is too small for you, don't worry. This PowerPoint is in Blackboard and you can review this or the PowerPoint after my lecture. Well, anyway, going back to where I was a while ago, I was talking about people who don't like history, and they say that it's irrelevant because we are in the 21st century. Why talk about people and places and events that happened several centuries ago? It's time to move on. It's time to face the problems that we have today. The problems of yesterday are already done. And so, why bother about them? See? They say historians like me are like people who drive a car and we are always looking at the rear view mirror and we don't look at the road ahead. And so what will happen? We will be in a tragedy. So they don't like historians. Anyway, they say it's better to look at the present, the problems, the current events, focus on today, because history is already a finished thing. They say past is past. But, you know, later on you will see the truth behind that saying, past is past. I have an office mate, and one day he walked up to me and he said, "Sir Jet, I don't like what you are teaching because you are teaching about dead people, about heroes. Why don't you just let them rest in peace?" Wow. So he doesn't like history. Well, anyway, there are 7, okay, you see that very big number? 7 big reasons why we need to study history. And by knowing today these 7 reasons, you will see that these 7 reasons would easily defeat those people who say they don't like history and history should not be studied at all. Alright? So, are you ready to know the 7 reasons why we need to study history? Okay, so let's get started and focus on our TV screen. Okay, the 7 reasons why we need to study Philippine history. Okay, are you ready? Yes. Alright, so number 1, the first reason would easily defeat all those critics. Just the first reason itself is enough. The law says so. The government is telling us, study Philippine history whether you like it or not. You need to study Philippine history. That's the law of the land. The Constitution, the highest law of the country, says in Article 14, Section 3, that all educational institutions, that means all schools, elementary, high school, college, private, and public schools, shall include the study of the appreciation of the roles of national heroes in the historical development of the country. It's required to study the lives of heroes and how they help develop what we have today, the Philippines. So we cannot escape the law. You don't want to be a lawbreaker, so you study history. Okay? Even the new curriculum, beginning in 2018, the government requires Philippine history in college as a GE subject, while the government scrapped away English, chemistry, algebra, trigonometry as GE subjects. In the generation of your ates and kuyas, we used to study these subjects as a requirement. But now, in the new GE curriculum, they are gone, but history remains. So that's how the government looks at Philippine history. It's really very important. Okay? Number 2 reason why we need to study Philippine history is to develop pride and nationalism, for us to have this burning love for the Philippines in our heart. How can it be developed? By looking at the lives of our ancestors, our heroes. You know, when I was a little boy, I used to see my father bring home a trophy, not just one, but several trophies every month, because he was a champion tennis player. And seeing my father being that great with his achievements make me realize that my identity is also something special. I belong to a great family. I have in my genes the genes of a champion. I can be great someday, like my dad. So that's the same thing, or the same effect, when we study the lives of our heroes. We will realize that our genes, okay, are the genes of brave men. Okay? We can be good and great and accomplish much, just like our ancestors. And we will understand that when we study Philippine history. We also appreciate the sacrifices of those heroes to attain the freedom that we enjoy today. What we have today is a product of their blood, tears, and sweat in their very own lives. And so we must treasure them. Okay? The enjoyment that we have today is because of them. So we love them more. We love our country more, seeing the hardships that our country has gone through. Alright? And that's what we call nationalism. We will have an increased love for our country when we study history. We will add up to our being a Filipino. If you say, Sir Jet, I really love the country. Okay? But I tell you, after this term, your love for your country will be much, much bigger than what it is now on the first week of classes. So that's what history will do to you. Develop your pride and nationalism. You know, someday your children and grandchildren will ask you questions about Philippine history. Maybe because they have a homework, or because they are curious about our history. And if you didn't take history seriously when you were a student, what can you tell your grandchildren? So you have to be ready to give them accurate answers. So you have to know your history, so you can tell them. You can tell them the great story of our nation. Now that's what I call continuity. The next generation must continue the story. And how can they continue the story if they don't know the story? So we must study history so that we can tell them the story. If we stop talking about history, then there will be a dead end, okay, in the development of pride and nationalism in the next generation. Okay, number 3 reason why we need to study Philippine history is to understand the present. Okay, we understand the present by studying the past, because the roots of the issues and problems we are seeing today can be found in the past. I tell you a while ago, critics say past is past. That is false, because who you are is the product of your past. Okay? Who you are today is because of what you have gone through in the past. So, the problems that we see today are products of the past. So, to solve them, we must study the problems of the past. See the connection, how it flows into the future, into the present. So we have a better approach or a better solution for the problems that we have today. The past is connected to the present. You know, I have here 2 aquariums. This is aquarium past and this is aquarium present. And they are connected by a hose. So the water flowing here in aquarium past is actually or literally the same water that is flowing in aquarium present. So what you will see here in the present is actually from the past. Okay, example of an issue or a problem we are experiencing in the present is great colonial mentality among us, the present generation. You don't believe that you have colonial mentality? Look at your name. Your parents gave you that name. It's a Western name. It's an American name. And I bet you will also give American names to your kids. Would you name your children native names like Tekla or Kurdapia? You wouldn't. You would give them cool names like Gerald or Tiffany or Clark. See, these are the names that we know and we believe are nice and cool, and it's because of colonial mentality. Now, where did we get this kind of mentality? We look at the past, okay? Because we have been colonized by the Americans. So, you see, the effect of the past vibrates to the present. Colonial mentality is because of our past. Another example is our regionalistic tendencies. What is regionalism? It is the love for the region. If nationalism is love for the nation, regionalism is love for your own locality, your own province or region, and you look down on people of the other regions. For example, during elections, you would certainly vote for senatorial candidates coming from your province, while you wouldn't vote the candidates coming from other provinces. You would prioritize your own senatorial homegrown candidate, right? And they do also that practice in the other provinces. Now, why do we have this kind of practice in the present? Because in the past, if we look at pre-colonial Philippines, we are actually not one united nation, but we are composed of several mini kingdoms called barangays. Okay? And each barangay would have its own datu, and the people in his barangay would have their loyalty on him, not on the other datu. And if the people in this barangay would meet the people from the other barangay or the other island, they will look at them as foreigners, not as nation mates. See? And so today it is still in our blood. Okay? We still have remnants of that mentality even up to today. And that's how we understand the present, by looking at the past. We need to do that. We need to learn that skill of critical thinking. Why? Because we need to avoid the mistakes of the past. There's an old Tagalog proverb which says, ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. And it's saying that the past is important for you to succeed in the present. Okay? Because if you commit the mistakes of the past, then you will not reach your goals here in the present. The English counterpart says history repeats itself. What does that mean? It means that when you fail this term, I'll see you again next term in my class. History repeats itself. Now, seriously, it means that we have the responsibility to study the past so that we will not commit the mistakes in the present. That's what Teodoro Agonthius said in his book. We have the responsibility to learn from the people of the past so that we will have the ability to prevent them from happening in our time. So that is the third reason why we need to study Philippine history, to understand the present and protect ourselves from stumbling. Number 4 reason is to say something to the foreigners. This is a very practical reason. You know, foreigners would ask you questions like, what's the holiday for? Okay, who are the people in your money? What are their accomplishments? They will ask you about street names. Who is Quirino? Who is Rojas? Okay, when they see the street sign Rojas Boulevard, okay, the monuments they see, okay, they will ask you, who's that person? And we should be ready to give them accurate answers, because if not, then we are a humiliation. Because for them, you know, most foreigners, they know their history. They can talk about their history. But we Filipinos, very few of us really can talk about history to foreigners. Do you know who are the 3 people in the 1,000 peso bill? What's the common denominator of the 3? What are their accomplishments? Do you know? So, things like that. We should be prepared to answer such questions. We Malayans are geared to be in the global workplace. One day you will be working with the international community. You will be talking with people from all over, and they will ask you about your roots, about your country, your history. So you should have something to say to them. So study Philippine history seriously. Alright? Number 5 reason why we need to study Philippine history is to correct historical fallacies. You know, sad to say, there are many false information in our history books. And another sad thing is that our teachers in elementary and high school didn't know that these are false information. And so they teach them to us. And in our time, we must correct them. Okay? The errors in history. Now, why do we have such errors in history? Because much of our history is written in the pangkayong pananaw. Okay? Kayo. Okay? Pangkayong pananaw. That it is the outsider's perspective. It's when a foreigner tells us, this is your history. You Filipinos, this is what happened to you. Okay? And why do we have the pangkayong pananaw in our history books? Because who wrote our history? It's not us Filipinos. It was the historians from Spain and America, the Spanish explorers, the Spanish priests, they were the ones who wrote the events that happened in our country. And they landed in our history books today. When the Americans came, they did the same. The administrators wrote the events, the journalists in the colonial era, they wrote the contents that we read in our history books. And they were written in their perspective. What's wrong with their perspective? They turn out to be the bida in the story, and we Filipinos become the kontrabida. You see, history is written in the perspective of the victors, the winners of wars. They are the ones who write about their exploits. If you're a loser, you don't write what your loss is. But you know, these colonizers, okay, they wrote in their perspective, and we find their perspective in our history books. Example, okay, the very, very classical question in grade 1. Teacher will ask students, "Children, who discovered the Philippines?" And the instant answer would be Magellan. You see? That is a historical fallacy. Because before Magellan, there were people already living in the Philippines. Lapu-Lapu and friends. Okay? We call them the Malayans. The brown race. They were all over the archipelago before Magellan. So it was them who discovered the Philippines. Okay? When the Philippines was uninhabited, probably they were the first people who came here. And so they should be labeled as the real discoverers of the Philippines. But why do we teach Magellan discovered the Philippines? Because Magellan wrote history himself, okay? Or his companions, the historians who were with him in the journey, wrote that he discovered the Philippines. And that's what we find in our history books. So we need to correct that fact. Another example is about Macario Sakay, that guy with the long hair. Okay? He was portrayed as a bandit by the Americans. He was actually a revolutionary in the perspective of the Filipinos. He fought the Americans in the war together with General Luna. You know, he's a contemporary of Luna. Look, he's wearing the same uniform. But because he's the enemy of the Americans put in the textbooks that he was a bad guy. He stole chickens from the people. Okay? And he's a criminal, wanted by the law. And that was what the Filipino people learned about Macario Sakay in the next several decades. And now we are correcting it in our time, that he was a good guy, he fought for our freedom. He's a freedom fighter, not a bandit. So we need to correct such historical fallacies by rewriting or reconstructing Philippine history in the pantayong pananaw. The pantayong pananaw is when a Filipino tells a fellow Filipino about Philippine history. Pantayo, that means the insider's perspective. How do you tell a fellow Filipino about your story? You say tayo. Okay? Pantayong pananaw. You say, we Filipinos are good. We Filipinos accomplished much. We are brave. We are better. We are the bida in the story. That is the pantayong pananaw. We. Pantayo, not pangkayo. Okay? And so, today, most history books are now going to that direction. Writing or reconstructing Philippine history in the Filipino perspective. So, in our class, we will look and discover, okay, many more fallacies, and we will correct them. Alright? Exciting? We will be like detectives. Okay, number 6 reason why we need to study Philippine history is to build local history. This may be a new word to you, local history. Um, the sad thing is much of our history is Manila-centric or Luzon-centric. When you buy a book which says Philippine history, you browse through it, the people and the events that are written on it are all about Manila, the capital of the Philippines, or Luzon. But when we say Philippine history, Philippines is not only Luzon. Philippines is also Visayas and Mindanao. But why don't we see stories about Visayas and Mindanao? What did you learn in elementary history? Who were the heroes taught in school? Rizal is from Laguna. Bonifacio is from Manila. Aguinaldo is from Cavite. Mabini is from Batangas. Wow, these places are all in Luzon. These people are all from Luzon. Whatever happened now to Visayas and Mindanao? The events that happened, and you read in Philippine history, like the Death March, it happened in Bataan, and Bataan is in Luzon. The Battle of Tirad Pass, okay, is in northern Luzon. The execution of Rizal in Luneta. The Cry of Pugadlawin in Caloocan. The Declaration of Independence in Kawit, Cavite. These are all Luzon stuff. But, there are also heroes from the Visayas and Mindanao. They also fought the Spaniards and the Japanese and the Americans. But why are they not in history books? It's now time to really rewrite our history books and include these unsung heroes from the other corners of our country. That's what we call local history. Okay? Now, even in your own barangay, not necessarily Visayas or Mindanao, local history can also be about your little corner. What happened in your barangay or in your town during the Spanish times or during World War II? There must be some local personality there who fought for our freedom or did something great during the difficult time in our history. And we must find them and document their stories. That's what modern history students do. Not just memorize dates, but also go out and find local history in your places, okay? In your families. Maybe there is a Katipunero in your family and you don't know. Okay, so that's what we will do in this class. Build local history. Okay, and number 7 reason why we need to study Philippine history is to have fun. Yes! Woo! History is fun. History is exciting. You will wake up each morning and say, wow, I miss history class. I can't wait to be in Sir Jet's history class because it's fun. No, history is very entertaining. When you read stories about people and places that happened long time ago, it's like reading a fairy tale story during bedtime when you were a little boy or a little girl. It keeps you excited. It keeps you imagining about things. And in this present age and in this present situation we are in this pandemic, everybody's looking for some kind of entertainment. There must be a better form of entertainment than TikTok. Yes, and that's Philippine history. It can be very entertaining. Like, you can have a cosplay. Okay? You want to have a cosplay in class? Dress up like a Katipunero or a soldier or a guerrilla. In Malayan, how we teach history is different. You have to say goodbye now to the memorization style of teaching history. Yes, I will not require you to memorize dates in this class. I will not ask dates in the exam. No more memorization. But instead, what we will do is analysis. Okay? We will analyze the why of the things that we are talking about in history class. Okay? Why rather than the when. Alright? Isn't that exciting? And so, in that way of teaching, history will be fun and entertaining. And, it's like a family looking at a photo album. You, me, together with your classmates, we will be flipping the pages of history just like a family flips the photo album and look at the pictures and have fun, cry together, laugh together, reminisce those events. That's what will happen in our class. And we will have fun. Alright? So those are the 7 reasons why we need to study Philippine history. Alright? So without looking at your notes, okay? Why we need to study Philippine history? Because the law says so. Number 2, to develop pride and nationalism. Number 3, to understand the present, because the past forms the present. And so we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. Number 4, to tell something to the foreigners. Number 5, to correct the historical fallacies using pantayong pananaw. And number 6, to build local history. Okay? To document the stories of the unsung heroes and have them appear in the history books in the future. And number 7, to have fun. Okay, so are you having fun? Remember that history can be fun and entertaining. Alright, so that's our lesson for today. This has been Sir Jet saying goodbye and thank you.